Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack and Dave here, and we're going to be giving our sort of quick reaction, our sort of quick impressions, maybe our ersten Eindrücken, our sort of quick impressions on the likes of Julian Nagelsmann, everybody. Supposedly, he's becoming the front runner here, according to Christian Falk of the likes of Sport Bild. I think he's a bit of a sort of an inside man when it comes to Bayern Munich, sort of media news and everything over in Germany. And I basically come out and said that the likes of Julian Nagelsmann is very tempted over taking the Tottenham Hotspur job this summer because he has, of course, I think, been rejected slash sort of declined his offer from the likes of Chelsea. I think originally he was the front man slash kind of the lead target over there at Chelsea. No longer the case. Seems like things maybe didn't work out there with his discussions over with Todd Bowley. And now, according to at least Christian Falk over at Sport Bild, Julian Nagelsmann's the front runner over at Spurs and is actually quite tempted maybe by the job over by us. But we thought maybe we give sort of our quick thoughts, maybe on variety of things, maybe surrounding Julian Nagelsmann, kind of get ahead on things. So everybody, that sounds interesting to you, do hit that like button as well. Do get your comments down below on what your thoughts are on Nagelsmann. Are you very excited by these news? Are you a bit skeptical? Are you maybe just kind of going to wait and see? Maybe it's also just kind of hearsay. Let me know, everybody, in those comments down below, your thoughts on Julian Nagelsmann. But maybe first, Dave, we sort of break down maybe what Julian Nagelsmann could probably bring to Spurs, at least tactically, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the more juicy stuff, I think, when it comes to him and kind of, the drama, you could say, surrounding the likes of Nagelsmann. But maybe when we go back in time to his days over at Hoffenheim, you can actually see that he is quite a tactically versatile guy. And he played actually a version of kind of a back three where he did like a 3-1-4-2, or you could say maybe like a 3-5-2 in some sense over there at Hoffenheim. And what I'm actually really curious about, really, and something this has kind of followed him along over at his various clubs, is he really did get a lot out of actually his center backs over at his clubs. Kevin Vogt, in particular, there you can see through the middle, was converted from originally a center mid into a center back, but basically he would step in a midfield. He would be a real facilitator with the ball kind of in the central kind of areas of the pitch, and really stood out as one of the maybe kind of key players in his sort of system, with Nagelsmann. And Nicolas Zula, you can tell right there, obviously got his sort of kind of name to fame, if I'm not mistaken, over at Hoffenheim as well, basically with Nagelsmann. So you could see that he's actually gotten quite a lot out of certain center backs. And if you even were to go to some of his other sides, maybe over at Leipzig as well, you can see some pretty big names there. Upamecano, of course, again, occupying that sort of central role in the middle there, a real facilitator from, kind of the back line. And it's something that we'll maybe talk about in just a second there. But I'm really curious as to who he might go after this summer when it comes to that sort of central role in the backline, because there's so many different players that, really can maybe do that role, but none are at Spurs, obviously, because we really do struggle in the technical areas when it comes to our defenders. So he's definitely going to have to go into the transfer market. And with such sort of a unique role that he seems to find with these center backs, he's definitely going to be very specific about it. He obviously used Konate as well, who's a very good center back now at Liverpool. Mukiele, who kind of switched in between being a center back as well as sort of a right wing back, he's gotten a lot out of. Willie Orban, the Hungarian defender, he's gotten plenty out of. And I do believe Klosterman and Halstenberg, he was able to get, decent spells out of as well. So he's a very sort of tactically versatile manager. He's definitely been known for using back threes and back fives, but he's been using, 4-2-3-1s. He was using as well, a 3-4-3 against us. Actually, this was sort of his lineup, I believe, when he actually came up against Spurs in the Champions League against Jose Mourinho's side. So I'm very interested in, Julian Nagelsmann, because he's a very tactically versatile manager. If anything, actually, he's sort of, if been criticized for being tactically, maybe too, thoughtful. Maybe he actually switches things up a bit too much. In fact, over at his days at Bayern, which we'll get stuck into maybe at why things went wrong there, but one of the reasons he was criticized even by his own players was that he was kind of a bit too kind of over methodical, you could say, when it came to the tactics. He was switching things up, making too many tweaks here and there, in either in game or in training, or just even from game by game basis. And certain players just wanted a bit of a groove, whereas he just kind of is a bit of a tactician, kind of is a bit of a Guardiola. In fact, he's actually quite heavily influenced and is a big admirer of Pep Guardiola, just like Thomas Tuchel, I think, was as well. And another thing quickly on Nagelsmann is that he is actually, I think, more, you would say, not typical kind of German style football, in the sense that he's not big on the sort of, vertical kind of nature of the game, where it's about, winning the ball back high up the pitch, but then also counterattacking right with pace and counterattacking with a lot of sort of danger and directness. He doesn't really play as direct, I think, as other managers out in Germany. And that was something that made him quite unique, was that he had kind of more elements of kind of the Pep Guardiola sort of win the ball back up high up the pitch, but then sort of control the game after you win the ball back up high up the pitch. Don't just immediately kind of go after them and try to sort of make the game really chaotic and sort of kind of direct. He was kind of about retaining possession and making sure that he had control of the game. So that will be interesting. So I'm curious, Dave, really, when it comes to Nagelsmann on a tactical level, is that he is going to need a huge center back revival, and I do think he's going to need, maybe a big midfield revival, and also I think as well he also got plenty out of the wing backs. But I'm just curious. I mean, your thoughts. I mean, he's used a back three, he's used a back five, he's used a 4-2-3-1. I mean, do you think on a tactical level, Nagelsmann, do you feel like he'll suit the Premier League, or do you have some question marks? Because the other reason too is that I do have question marks over the fact that his teams have always been a bit open, I think, kind of defensively, right? And in the Premier League, could he get a bit punished for that, right? Knowing that, it is maybe a bit more ruthless than maybe the Bundesliga when it comes to sort of attacks. But Dave, he's done a variety of different systems. He's young, he's innovative, and let's be honest, that's what a lot of Spurs fans have asked for, is a young and innovative manager.
Look, Spurs fans have asked for a young, innovative manager with fresh ideas and a good brand of football. Now, look, to be fair to the guy, the brand of football is good. People really enjoyed watching his Leipzig team. He done a great job at Hoffenheim, but also when he got sacked at Bayern, in their statement, they made sure to say, Julian shares our aspiration to play successful and attractive football. So, that's clear that all of that is there, and it comes with this guy. I think the fact that, you speak about, the fact that he trains up his training methods. I know Bayern Munich players didn't like it, but Tottenham players don't like, repetitive training, as we've seen with their complaints under Conte. So maybe they might actually, he might get a tune out of them in that regard. And, also, when I look at the tactics and the way he plays, right, it's clear that we've gone down that way with recruitment. And I maybe think we've probably gone too far that way to be able to chop and change, which is what Spurs fans have aimed at the club the last few years, constantly chopping and changing direction. So bringing in someone like Nagelsmann with the wing-back system, and if he does play the back three or back five, whatever you want to call it, we don't necessarily have to change tact in our recruitment policy. We can still go down that way. So I think that's also another positive from Nagelsmann.
He got the best out of Angelino. He got the best out of Angelino, fellow Spanish right back, Dave. Pedro Porro, maybe will eventually, admire him as a fellow Spanish sort of wing back. And do you think as well, maybe like you just said there, the fact that Nagelsmann is tactically versatile, but maybe could work with he has a proven record to work with some of the players that we brought in recently. Like he has attacking wingbacks in Udogie, he has attacking wingbacks in Porro. He has also maybe the case of, a lot of forward players like Kulusevski, Richarlison, etc. He might, see, at least the semblances of, a core of a squad that he can work with, where I hate to cut you off and, go down a different bunch of rabbit holes. But my biggest concern with Nagelsmann, Dave, is that I think he's going to get the best out of a lot of players, like you just said, we brought in recently, which is probably why Spurs are really interested in him. A lot of the players we brought in recently could really suit him. But he, more than anyone, I think, will need a major revival of that back line, because he seems to ask a lot of his defenders. He asks a lot of them technically, like we saw with Upamecano, like we saw with Kevin Vogt. I mean, he asked them basically be like playmakers out of the back line, right? And there's only one player who we could see maybe doing that, like a Longley or a Romero, but really both of them we don't really trust too much for that. And so he'll need a really good player in that role. And then he'll also need defenders that can be able to defend, in kind of dangerous, sketchy situations and make the right decisions and make the right tackle and not get us caught out, because his type of football is very front foot. It's very possession dominant. It's very high up the pitch. So there's that to consider as well. Like, while I think he'll probably get the best out of Pedro Porro, Udogie, players like that, I'm thinking like the back line, if anything, is going to need a huge turnover under him. And he's been leaky defensively in the past. He has been leaky defensively.
Look, regardless of who comes in here, talking about these tactics and all, it's all null and void unless we bring in centre-backs regardless. What I will say is, he does like one of his centre-backs to take a risk, but he also had good defenders either side of them. You know, you had Schula, Hoffenheim beside Vogt,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Vogt would be the ball player, Schula would be the destroyer. You look at Upamecano and Konate. Konate is more of a good defender, gets stuck in. Upamecano is good on the ball
Good
from
point.
Bayern. And now then, you know, when Konate went to Liverpool, they replaced him with De Ligt. So it's clear that he likes that ball player defender that takes risks. But with that risk comes you losing the ball. So you have to have defenders behind him that can that love a challenge, that can defend. So we are going to need to specifically focus on centre backs. And I'd also argue a new goalkeeper for his system as well, to be able to play that way, to be able to build out from the back, to be able to take the risks that come with that. You know, we've seen the repercussions of it this year by not having them players. So if we're bringing this guy in, it's got to happen. It just has
Sweeper
to.
keeper as well as a ball playing keeper as well.
Mm,
Midfield quickly, he had Konrad Leimer, Marcel Sabitzer. You look at guys like that, very technically gifted players, very
mm,
hardworking players. I think he could do with a lot of the midfielders we have right now, but he will also, I think, need a creative midfielder because he had guys like Nkunku, he had guys like Danny Olmo as well, he had Emil
yeah,
Forsberg too. So he'll
Musiala now.
probably need a creative midfielder, at least of some kind, but I don't think he'll be too overfussed with the midfield, knowing that he has hardworking players in
Mm,
that midfield. And he also has players that are comfortable playing in that deeper role. Like he had Sebastian Rudy at Hoffenheim playing a very deep role for him. He had the likes of, I think, Kevin Campbell as well, playing a very deep
mm,
role for him. So he probably would be okay for the time being, I think, with that regard. He'd be okay with the wingbacks. And I mean, he should be okay with the front line. I think if you're not okay with our front line, you might as well not have the job because you're probably too
mm,
picky. But the back line, I think, is where I'm worried, Dave. I am worried when it comes to him. And I'm worried about will he get the center backs he really needs because he's already
mm,
shown he's not exactly the most defensively kind of astute manager either. So he'll really need top quality center backs. And Spurs have shown maybe they're not willing to push the real dollar kind of when it comes to that defense. And like you said, the goalkeeper,
mm,
not even including as well, will also
mm.
cost top dollar, I think, as well. Definitely
Just
interesting.
quickly, on the Cam situation. Look, you have seen links of us monitoring Pedro Goncalves. You know, I've seen reports saying that we've been in discussions with James Madison's camp for quite some time. So it does look like Tottenham are looking to bring in that Cam. So I don't think that will be an issue. However, getting the defenders to make this system work for this guy will be, because I know he defends from the
That's the
front,
key.
right? Ideally, he likes to keep possession, but he likes to defend from the front. But that ball is going to come back at you at times. You're not constantly going to keep turning it over. And what we're seeing now with what we've currently got, they just get straight at our goal. There's no challenges, unchallenged, have a pop at our goal. You know, it's gonna we will concede more, believe it or not. I reckon in Nagelsmann's system, unless we do bring in then defenders, and that's the key component that we need. Because look, I would argue no more than a Cam, because you could convert a Gil Messi into a Cam. Kulusevski
Mm.
just talked about playing on the inside more as a Cam as well. So there are players there that you could drop Kane back and put Richarlison up top if you wanted to. So we do have them options if need be. But I would focus on the centre backs if we were bringing in this guy. That's key.
And knowing that he's not exactly been like like we both brought up, he asks so much of these center backs. So like that's going to
Mm,
be key. Like, does he even get in the right ones, to make his system work,
mm.
and it'll be interesting.
It's the big
Um,
question.
and another big part of, Julian Nagelsmann, another big question is a lot of things that happen are in the background over at Bayern because I would say maybe the one thing you would point out is that his first season, at least on the footballing side of things, before we dive deep into the things outside of the football, on the footballing side of things, his first season was really poor. He got knocked out in the DFB Pokal by Mönchengladbach 5-0 in, like, I believe the second round or whatever. So he was knocked out quite early. He got knocked out early in the Champions League by Villarreal, by Unai Emery in the quarterfinals. He even struggled as well in the round of 16 against RB Salzburg. He also, as well, apparently, like on a tactical level, I guess, like I kind of brought up earlier, seemed to sort of kind of maybe change things up a bit too much at Bayern and supposedly kind of, made too many tweaks here and there in either training or kind of in game. And certain players just wanted a bit more kind of just sort of consistency. What I would kind of say to that is there seems to be some type of issues with the squad in general at Bayern. So I don't really know how much of a stick I really want to beat him with that because they do seem to maybe have a bit of an issue there. But Dave, I
Mm,
think the thing we really have to get stuck into is there are a lot of things that kind of happen outside of kind of the dressing
yeah.
room or things that happen, I guess, inside the dressing room in kind of a dramatic sort of way that maybe actually more led to his sacking. I don't think it was as much the football that led to his sacking because, like plenty of people have brought up, he was actually doing quite well this season. His squad defeated PSG. I know the league was looking a little bit suspect, but they probably still were going to finish out on top. It was just more, I think, actually stuff outside of the football pitch that maybe led to sort of his sacking. And maybe I'll let you go first on that.
Yeah, look, first of all, before I get into this, because this is actually the reasons why I don't want Nagelsmann to get the job, because I foresee trouble coming down the road, right? But I want to stress that this guy is more than capable tactically to be able to take this club and move it in a direction. But for the reasons that I'm about to go through, I think, right man, probably wrong timing. So, look, first of all, to maybe understand my first point is I'm going to have to get into Bayern Munich just briefly, the outskirts. So Bayern, came out with a pandemic cash-strapped. They were hard hit by that pandemic, and they had to change their tact on how they operate. They were used to picking up some of the best players across the world and the best players in the Bundesliga for big money. Now, because of financial reasons, they had to change course and start looking at bringing in young talent. Also bringing young talent from the youth academy into the first team to fill that team out. And the whole idea is to start developing these guys. For instance, bringing in Gravenberch, Mazraoui from Ajax, highly sought after players. So, and I've no doubt that they pinpointed Nagelsmann to be that guy to nurture that based on what he's done at Leipzig, right? Based on what he's done at Hoffenheim to develop these guys and nurture these guys. However, you've heard reports lately, just recently, Gravenberch, being linked to Liverpool, maybe wanting out. But same as Mazraoui maybe talking, wanting out because they haven't been getting the game time. And that was largely
Sabitzer went to Man United.
Yeah, and that was largely on the Nagelsmann, who they expected actually to nurture these guys, right? So, for me, when you look at Tottenham, Jack, right, we need that right now. We've got, and I'm going to go through some players here now, right? You've got Kulu, Gill, Spence, Scarlett, Parrott, Skip, White, Devine, Mundell, Adoji. You've got the under-17s who have recently won the Premier League Cup. The under-18s are in that same competition in the final on the 4th of May. You've got an Alfie Dorrington and Mikey Moore. So you've got a lot of young talent around Tottenham, and some of them, if not half of them, also some of the recruits we've made for the under-21, we've actually recruited to bring in here. So we now need a manager who is going to develop them, nurture them, and stuff like that. And one of the reasons why Nagelsmann was actually sacked at Bayern is because he failed to develop these guys, because their talent maybe wasn't coming to the fore. Like I highlighted, they were okay with his football, but the fact that they were going backwards in the Bundesliga and he failed to nurture the talent that they brought him in to do is one of the reasons why is the reasons why they sacked him, according to a Sky Sports publication. So for me, that's a huge concern. He didn't want to go down that route of Bayern. Is he going to go down that route of Tottenham, or does he want to? I have my question marks over that. And you got to remember, they hired this guy on a 5-year contract, sacked him 2 years in, and paid $25 million for him. You've got to ask, when they've seen him up at close quarters and how he operates, why have they sacked him when they pinpointed that this guy is the guy? And I hear you, Jack, that they have trouble with the squad. That's highlighted by Mane punching Sané there the other day. And it does look like there's a bit of infighting and stuff. However, I actually do think it's sort of the personal issues surrounding him himself that has maybe actually cost him his job at Bayern Munich. When you look at what he'd done at Leipzig and Hoffenheim, he had stability in his personal life. He was focused, and that reflected itself on the pitch. When you look at his time at Bayern, there's not a lot of good reports coming out. For instance, they were sitting second in the Bundesliga this season behind Dortmund. They had Dortmund coming up. And this guy is with his new girlfriend on a skiing trip. They were angry over that. They were saying, hang on, now that doesn't set a good standard, a good culture, or a good sort of message to the overall squad or people in and around the club or the culture around the club. So he actually got the text and the sack while he was on that holiday. Then you look at it as well. The dressing room, they did not trust him. Mm-hmm. Why? Now I'm going to get into that in a minute. But first of all, we need a manager who's going to have the trust of the dressing room, a bit like Pochettino, because once you have that, Jack, you have players that will run all day long for you. You have players that will go out and do their best to implement exactly what you're trying to get across. You build that relationship, you build that trust. And we need that at Tottenham right now. We've got a really fractured dressing room, a really broken dressing room, no sort of leaders. So we need someone that's going to come in a bit like what Poch done and build that rapport. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure this guy is going to do it. And the reason why is because he had an affair with a reporter who actually worked for Bild. She actually was covering Bayern Munich for Bild,
Yeah.
and she ended up forming a relationship with Nagelsmann. She ended up losing her job because of it. But at the time, there was a lot of stories being leaked actually into the press. And that was obviously coming from Nagelsmann feeding her, and she was then feeding it back, and it was being reported on. And that's ultimately what broke down that relationship between him and the rest of the players in
Yes.
that dressing room. They felt like they could no longer trust him. We can't have that. We've seen the effects of having a lot of off the field issues with a manager only this season with Antonio Conte. Look at the effects it has on the training pitch, which then has an effect onto the actual football pitch on the match days, on the
Mm.
weekends and midweek. And we cannot go down that route again. I think this guy is a good manager, tactically astute, but I must stress, personal issues is why he got the sack at Bayern, and it's why people are maybe looking at him a different light compared to the jobs he's done at Leipzig and Hoffenheim. And right now at Tottenham, we don't need that. We need someone that's young, focused, fresh. You not only do you have to deal with Daniel Levy, director of football, Scott Munn, you have a big job with the squad as well. And not everything is going to go your way. With Tottenham, there always have to be a bit of take, and that brings a lot of stress, a
Mm.
lot of stress. And you don't need anything else going on. You just need your sole focus on Tottenham. And I question, is his sole focus going to be on Tottenham for the massive job that needs to be done? I'm not so sure, Jack.
The question I also draw from that, Dave, in kind of a conclusionary manner too, is like, does Nagelsmann leave all of that with all those mistakes, like you brought up there? Those are mistakes on his behalf, like at the end of the day, that led to his sort of undoing, I think, at Bayern Munich. A lot of it, like we said, wasn't really exactly like sort of entirely tactically related or form related and everything. It was kind of a mixed bag of a variety of reasons that some of it was really entirely within his control, right? And some of it had to do with his own personal life and the way he sort of conducted himself. And you think, Dave, does he have a bit of self-reflection and does he come out a better, more mature person? Because at the end of the day, he is actually still quite young. I mean, he's practically, I
Yeah.
think, like Thomas Muller's age or like something like that. So he could maybe learn and could maybe become a more mature manager and kind of learn from how it went wrong because he
Yeah.
actually is a Bayern Munich fan. So to see that he basically lost out on his dream job, failed is a debatable thing for another time, but he lost out on his dream job, right? And for reasons maybe he might think are a bit unfair, regardless, they used a lot of the personal stuff outside of the football club as part of the reasoning for why they basically sacked him, actually. And so he might look at that thinking, kind of lost one of my dream jobs because of things that probably were within my control. Maybe he might come out a better person after that, or he might be a stubborn person. We'll find out. And a lot of that stuff could leak into Tottenham Hotspur, and some of that sort of behavior could follow over to Tottenham Hotspur. And then, like you said, Dave, that's why you would have your doubts. That's why you might have a bit of skepticism because you don't know whether he's going to be coming out a better person after all of this, right?
I think where the biggest problem comes from, Jack, and look, I want to first of all say this: everybody makes mistakes in life, and
Correct.
everyone deserves a second chance. And you're right, Jack; they can grow, they can learn from their mistakes. However, the sticking point is his new girlfriend. We already see a lot being leaked to the media in general from our playing squad. But someone like a Harry Kane, would he want stuff leaked out? Would he be weary of it? Would he ever forge that close relationship, knowing that there's a potential it could go to his reporter girlfriend and that could be shipped back to Bild? I'm not so sure, Jack, and that's why I don't think you'll be able to form that relationship with our squad, which is currently needed. You've also got a lot of players on the brink who can break that bracket from being a really good player into a world-class player, producing it on a regular basis, the likes of Pedro Porro, Basuma, Richarlison, or Romero, Bentancur, people like that, as well as all the young players I mentioned, the Kulu. And they need time, they need nurturing. And in order to get that out of them, you need to be able to build that relationship, that close rapport with them. And I just think if I was a player in that dressing room, I'd be very hesitant to open up myself to the guy. And because look, you
Yeah.
have to understand, managers want to know about the players' personal life problems so that they can help them with. I'm not sure some of these players would go to him knowing what's happened at Bayern. And that's where my question marks come over it. And with that, I'm not actually sure that he'll get the very best. And we've also seen a manager off losing one of the job he really liked. You see Nagelsmann at Bayern, well, Conte at Inter, he came off the back of a job that he really liked. He really enjoyed his time at Inter. And look sort of how it panned out at Tottenham. I'm kind of also a question. Is he a guy that would want to come here for 4 or 5 years, which is ultimately what we need? I'm not so sure, Jacko.
That's
I'm
another
really
actually big that's another good question mark, Dave. And I think we'll be maybe talking about Nagelsmann aplenty, and I think we brought up plenty of positives. And in case you accuse us of not bringing up any, I think Dave brought up the fact that Bayern actually said he plays on the front foot football. There's that to be said also as well. I mean, I think we can only touch on this briefly, but he absolutely gets on refs' backs. He got a fine even
love
for
that.
getting on refs' backs so
Love that.
much. So that's a good thing to see. We brought up too, tactically astute. He could work with some of the players that we have with the wing back system and everything as well. And he did a fantastic job, I think, at Hoffenheim. In fact, he probably did the best job you possibly could do there. Leipzig, what I would say, I think he could have maybe stood there a little longer. Like, it felt like he maybe left that a bit early, but maybe that's because Bayern was a dream job for him, right? And he wanted to take that opportunity when it was presented to him, and it didn't work out at Bayern for the reasons that Dave detailed there. And I think a lot of those reasons it didn't work out at Bayern could still kind of, lead into Tottenham Hotspur. Like, there's no doubt that that might not follow him. And that's where I think Dave's kind of question marks arise.
Yeah,
It's not really all tactical or anything like that. It's like some of those same
yeah.
problems, could they follow along with us at Spurs when we don't need it?
We don't need it. We've seen the effect of it this year with Antonio Conte with the personal problems off the pitch. Look how it ended. The manager ends up taking their eye off the ball in and around the club, which has an effect on the training pitch and on the soccer pitch. I, for one, do not want to go down that route again. I want someone that's going to come in and give 100%, not
Mm,
50% because they're preoccupied with other things.
mm.
This club needs 100%. Like I've said, I think the guy's actually a good manager, good brand of football. It's just the personal stuff. If that is all parked to one side and it's all sort of mellowed
It's a
down,
big
and
if, but yes.
if then why not? Why not give it a go? See what happens. Give him a shot. But I would say that the warning signs are sort of there.
Mm. And I think at the end of the day, we at the Irish Hotspur absolutely back our managers till the hilt when they get here too. We absolutely probably new nicknames will be coming in a plenty. You can count on that. But everybody hit that like button, please, on the way out. Leave your comments down below. Your thoughts on Nagelsmann, your thoughts on this story, if there's any validity you think to it, or if maybe Nagelsmann is actually interested in the Tottenham job and there is actually a chance that Spurs do pursue him. And maybe if also as well, Pochettino is no longer the case and Nagelsmann is someone we might have to get used to. So give me all your thoughts on Nagelsmann in the comments down below, everybody. Hit that like button on the way out, and we will be seeing you. Come
See,
on, you
come on,
Spurs.
Spurs.